Put your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now!
And I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with your Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield on YouTube and Rumble. You can find the show every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on both Rumble and Pop on YouTube. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, do me a favor. We're pretty close to that 10,000 subscriber mark, and I want to make sure if you're watching this show and you're not a subscriber, do us a favor. Hit that bell, become a subscriber, like the show, and comment, and of course, share it with a friend. Additionally, if you're watching us on Rumble, if you don't want to give any of your money to YouTube, you can watch us on Rumble, and you follow us on Rumble, like the show on Rumble, same as YouTube. Make a comment and share it with a friend. Now, you can catch a lot of my commentary that you don't see on this show on X. I have my X handle is at LAST Jordan. You can see there right below my name. And I also have another show that is on Rumble that is on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it is Briefing with the Chief, where I go over politics, public policy, and the news. And that one's a lot of fun. A little more serious. We do get a little serious on this show every now and then, just because my guests want to talk about it. And I want to talk about some of the stuff that's going on in the news today. But before we get to our show, I really want to do my regular plug for the LA Mission. Now, I was at the LA Mission for Thanksgiving, and I helped serve some food there, serve the guys, and the losangelesmission.org. That's their website. Go to the losangelesmission.org and make a donation. They serve hundreds of thousands of meals every year to the people on Skid Row. I just think that the homeless issue in Los Angeles and throughout California is just troubling, and it is complete and utter failure of government in California. But there are good nonprofit providers, and the Los Angeles Mission has been around for 85 years. They use cognitive behavioral therapy programs as well as other strategies to help people get off the streets and be productive members of society. They have a proven track record, and they have a little bit of a faith-based element, which I think is very important. And this is the losangelesmission.org. Go to their website, make a small donation, help out your fellow man today. Now, on this show, we're going way back. I decided to do a classic movie and bring on some folks who are like hard-boiled crime dramas and who like the movies to talk about the show. And the movie that we're going to review today is the Maltese Falcon. Fantastic movie. I remember watching it as a kid. It's won a lot of awards. Now, it is a different genre, and it's a different period, so the movie making is a lot different. But it's got one of my favorite old-time stars, Humphrey Bogart, in it. But before we get into the movie, let me bring on my guest. My first guest is retired Lieutenant John Baylis from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. He's a regular on the show. He's we were just talking about the cold spell that everybody's dealing with, and he is not dealing with it. I am not dealing with it, but he is a California refugee. He's over there in Nevada. Parts unknown. We don't want to tip the crowd to where he actually is at. Let's see. We had just had a comment from Dragon. You want to throw that one back up there? I'll read it. Let's see here. Chief, in my tribe means head to the tribe. Okay, this one's... I'm sorry. You're going to have to translate there for me, Mr. Dragon. I don't really understand that comment. Let me switch over to the comment side so I can see them as they come up and get off the private chat. Anyways, John, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
It's just great. Thank you for having me.
And so, one of the reasons why I wanted you on is because you do your homework and you actually like the movies. So I'm sure that you will give us some trivia about the movie that most of our audience hasn't heard yet, or that I'm not aware of. So thanks for coming on the show yet again. And let's get our second guest on here. He is author and retired homicide detective Danny R. Smith. And I invited Danny on because this is a hard-boiled crime drama. At least that's what it was written as. It was actually started as a book in 1930, and then it was made into the movie. And Danny R. Smith, not only did he write his memoir, Nothing Left to Prove, which I reviewed on my other show, Briefing with the Chief. You can go on iHeartRadio and you just Google iHeartRadio, Briefing with the Chief, one homicide detective story, and that show will come up and you can listen to Danny R. Smith talk about his career. But he also writes fictional, hard-boiled crime dramas. Hey, Danny, how you doing?
Good, Chief. How are you? Nice to see you. Hey, John.
Now, before I want to introduce the movie, I got to make a little costume change. Hold on a minute. Unfortunately, I use headphones, so I can't wear this the whole show. But I have a fedora, and it's always interesting. When you look at these old films, how they dress. I can see Danny's got kind of a fedora in the back there as well. And now I will tell you the only reason I have these hats because I'm not a real hat guy. I hated wearing hats unless I was in the sun. I wore a hat when I was working in the streets, but I went to the Naval Postgraduate School, the leadership program for the Homeland Defense and Security, and one of the guys was an admiral in the Coast Guard that was in my class, and he always wore a fedora. So at the graduation ceremony, it's like 4 weeks spread out over a year. One of the captains, who was also in the Coast Guard, was in the class. We had people from all over the place, sheriffs, under sheriffs, and chiefs. And so we decided all to get fedoras and wear them as a class prop, to make the guy feel good. So that's the only reason I have a fedora, but it does hopefully get us in the mood here and get us ready for this show. So, John, you like the movie?
Oh, I love it. Some of the acting's, not as good as Humphrey Bogart was outstanding, but Mary Astor,
yeah.
The acting and the directing back in 1940. Plus, she came from the silent era, and a lot of her actions and everything. If it was silent, she'd look great, but in the beginning, it's like, huh. But I love the movie though, and I love Sidney Greenstreet, Peter Lorre. Saw him in so many different movies, and they all played in Casablanca together.
Yeah. Well, somebody says I got to do a Humphrey Bogart impression. I don't know if I can do an impression, but I says, Louis, I think this is the beginning of a wonderful friendship. I don't know if I got that line right. Can you tell me where that line is from, John?
Casablanca.
That's right. That's right. Claude Rains. That's right. Claude Rains decides he decides that he's on the side of the Allies and starts working with the Germans, and of course the colonel is killed and he saves Humphrey Bogart, and they go on to fight with the Free French. Right. That was the last line of Casablanca. That's right, guys. I think I got it right. If somebody wants to do the research and correct my my quote there to make sure I got it right. Danny, what'd you think of the show? What did you think of the movie? You can be truthful.
No, I thought it was okay. Huh? Be truthful. I remember seeing the movie probably when I was a kid, maybe a teenager or something. I don't know. It'd been, quite a long time, obviously. And it was just kind of interesting watching it. It's like, God, this is really corny. I mean, it's just a different era, and I mean, it's got some of the greatest lines ever, but they are corny. You know what I mean? It's like, when you get slapped, you'll take it and you'll like it. I mean, shit like that. I mean, it's kind of funny, corny but funny, and of course, we're kind of spoiled because now we watch any kind of movie and it's just so realistic, and everything from the violence to everything is just so graphic and realistic. You watch a show like the Maltese Falcon, and the guy shoots someone in the gut, little pop, and the guy grabs himself, and he has some dramatic thing to say as he's going down. He's going to be instantly dead with no blood. And
Yeah,
so
different time.
You also, but
Yeah.
when you write, you have the advantage of having worked as a homicide detective for 8 years. So when you do a hard-boiled crime drama, it's a little different because you're writing from experience, right? So yeah, maybe that's
Yeah.
part of it, you know. But you know, the Maltese Falcon was released in 1941. It stars Humphrey Bogart, who, you know, obviously he's classic Hollywood, right? Old Hollywood. And it's got Mary Astor, as John mentioned, Gladys George, Peter Lorre, Sidney Greenstreet. So some interesting characters in here. Miles is Barton McLean, and I, you know, Peter Lorre,
And
he's
Ward
played
Bond.
he was Ward Bond was in there, right? And
They played the detectives.
yeah, Peter Lorre was you know, he had a really big career. Even Ward Bond, he was a character actor, but he was in a lot of John Wayne stuff. I think John Ford ended up liking him, used him a lot in his movies. But also, it was directed by a really exceptional director who directed a lot of fantastic films. I was looking at what he directed, and I had forgotten that he had done so many. He did The Treasure of Sierra Madre, which was probably
Phenomenal movie.
if I had to pick. I mean, I liked Casablanca just because it was they had that snippy dialogue. But Treasure of Sierra Madre was badges. I don't need no stinking badges. It was a fantastic movie, and that was probably one of the that was probably the
I thought
line.
that line was from Blazing Saddles.
No. It was a play on a Treasure of Sierra Madre, and he's getting robbed by some banditos, and they say they're cops, and he says, "Well, can I see your badges?" And that was his line: "Badges. I don't need no stinking badges." And of course, you know, Blazing Saddle picked it up. And The African Queen, which I wouldn't say that was Bogart's best vehicle, but it was a pretty good movie. But yeah, the man who would be king. Did you ever see that movie? That is with Michael Caine and God, who's the big tall actor? Sean Connery. Fantastic movie. I didn't know that he directed that one. But it was he did it just did so many great movies. But John Huston, classic Hollywood, great actors. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, so this is to address you, Danny, and you talk about the snippy dialogue. Now, I've been doing a lot of neo-noir stuff. We've done, I think with John, I did Mulholland Falls, right? And we did LA Confidential. Yeah, they're all considered neo-noir stuff. And I go, okay, you know what? I didn't bother looking in, well, what is neo-noir? And so I got the definition for noir. This is a noir film, one of the first. And so I figured, well, I guess I should look this up, right? So let me read this. It is a cinematic term used primarily to describe stylized Hollywood crime drama. So I think this is going to influence your writing going forward, Danny, particularly those who emphasize cynical attitudes and motivations. And you can see that in the Maltese Falcons. You can see it in LA Confidential. You can see it in Mulholland Falls, right? The 1940s and 1950s are generally regarded as the classic period of American film noir. Film noir is also associated with an area of low-key, black and white, visualized style, and has roots in German expressionists. Many of the prototypical stories and much of the attitude of the classic noir derive from the hard-boiled school of crime fiction, and it has emerged in the United States. And one of the things they talk about this is just the snippy dialogue that we see in the movie here, right? Yeah. So that's noir. I guess now I've decided to actually do a little more than just the basic research on movies and dig in there. But we do see the snippy dialogue in this movie, right? And so. Do you write snippy dialogue in your fictional novels, Danny?
Yeah, in fact, a lot of people refer to my books as noir, and you know, at first I wasn't sure if it's because, you know, my primary character wears a fedora, as did I when I worked Homicide, or if it was because of the snippy dialogue. But I think it's a little of both. I mean, I'm kind of a dinosaur, so I think that comes out in a lot of the dialogue that I write, especially through the primary character Dickie. But yeah, I've been kind of tagged with that.
Well, as now we're in a society where they police pronouns and everything else. We don't really get to say a lot of these kinds of things at work anymore, right, John? I mean,
Yeah.
I was going to say, until you said at work, I was going to say, wait, what? I say whatever I want.
well, now you do, yes, but obviously, it's unfortunately the men and women in law enforcement are suffering under these new rules
Oh
where
man.
you have everything is policed and everything, your feeling is hurt. God, I just remember when I did your book and we talked about when you went to Firestone and the first guy you wrote was said, I hate all white boys, right? And of course he's joking. And that's typical of being on training. You're going to get messed with a little bit, but you can't do that stuff anymore. Somebody will file a complaint, then there's an equity thing, and everybody's going to review it. Well, what was his motivation? And everybody's saying, we're just joking around. Well, you can't do it, so then he'll get a slap on the wrist, probably. But that's the way it is now. We're policing every single thing internally, and so maybe that's why these neo-noir and your books are fun, because people enjoy the snippy dialogue, right?
Yeah. And I was going to say, I even had, I had an editor that didn't last very long, but he was trying to correct some of my writing and saying, well, I don't think that's politically correct. I'm like, lady, I'm not politically correct. And the people who read my books appreciate that. We're not doing
right.
We're not doing PC. I mean, if you don't like my books, that's great. I don't care. I mean, it doesn't matter, because the people who do like them are the people who like the truth, the people who like the way things used to be, the way men and women and cops and bad guys interact on many different levels. And I write it realistic from an era that is unfortunately gone. So I think old dinosaurs like us love to read it because it takes you back. It makes you recall all the good times.
Reminds me of stuff we used to do.
Yeah.
Pull people over and talk to them and interrogate them and arrest them. And now it's like, may I pull you over, please?
Oh, I know. They just passed a new law in California. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, because I know you guys are California refugees. So when you pull somebody over now, you can't ask them. You know how the strategy was? Hey, do you know why I pulled you over? Because then they make you the admission right up front. It diffuses everything, right? No, now you can't do that per state law. This Chris Holden, this moron up in Pasadena, says, no, you have to lead with, this is why I pulled you over. And he says, this will reduce conflict, because the problem, here's the thing, where everybody's wearing body-worn cameras and you roll up and say, Mr. Smith, do you know why I pulled you over? Yeah, I was on my cell phone. Okay, well, that diffuses everything, right? And it's on video. Well, oh no, we got to protect people from themselves. We don't want them to make admissions. That's how I think this is all about. And all it does is create conflict, because now you're going to fight over, well, I didn't do that, instead of the guy going, yeah, all right, I did it, right, whatever. But that's what's going on in California. So I just wanted to reinforce your decision to leave in some degrees, other than the cold, was the right decision, at least politically, right? So, okay, John, I got to get into the writer here, because this goes back to history as well. The person who wrote the novel is Dashiell Hammett. Okay, and he was part of the Red Scare. He was part of the blacklist. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, even before that. Apparently, the reason he started writing these cop novels and stuff is he was a Pinkerton operative. He worked for the Pinkertons, and back in the day, Pinkertons became a national security / detective agency. And in fact, supposedly back in the day, they told Lincoln that they had stopped a plan to assassinate him. And Lincoln hired them as his personal protection. Didn't work very well, but yeah, and they became the.
That sounds so noir of you to say that. Go.
But then, as he went along, what was funny is, and it's really apropos today, he joined in 1930. He was part of the anti-fascist movement, Antifa. And in 1937, he joined the Communist Party. He also talked a lot of crap about the American Communist Party because they didn't do enough for the people. But where it comes into today's day of what's happening in the world, he became the chairman of the Civil Rights Congress. And their big deal was bail funding for political prisoners. That sound familiar to you guys?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and that's what's happening now. And in fact, he got so much in it. Plus, Pinkertons over the years, you know, they were the right hand of the unionists. You know, the anti-unionists. So Ford and all those people hired them to find the agitators to stop the unions from getting into the auto industry. That's where he had all those fights and beatings. Yeah. But anyways, so he was anti-fascist, a communist, and with he got like $126,000 donated to fund bail on like 10 different political prisoners. Half of them didn't show up for court. They ran away. And he was brought into court, and he refused to answer his name under the Fifth Amendment or anything else. Fifth Amendment, and they charged him with contempt of court, and he did like 30 days because he knew where these people went, but he wouldn't tell them. And that's exactly what's happening today. When you have to defund the police, you have no bail schedule where people are doing heinous crimes and go out and do the exact same crime the same day they're released. You know, robberies and beatings and everything else. So basically, that's where Dashiell Hammett and his comes from.
Well, it's our vice president was raising money for bail. So I mean, it's even worse because it's our top political leaders that are involved. And I will answer one of the questions. Pinkerton was the precursor to, I believe, the Secret Service, and so that helps you out there. So yes, it's not a police department, but a federal agency, the Secret Service, who do a great job. You know, I gotta do a movie where I can bring some of those guys on. I've done movies where I brought the federal marshals on, which are always a little interesting. The thing about Dashiell Hammett and that all these communists at the time, you know, they're all capitalists. They're making money in the movie industry. They're all capitalists.
It's like the girl in the Starbucks with her, you know, Apple laptop and her, you know, iPods and iPads and everything else, and you know, and she's like, you know, down with capitalism.
The other idiocy thing about these guys, particularly artists, if you actually read about what went on in the Civil War, or when the Bolsheviks took over in the Soviet Union, and the which I think we're going through now a little bit, is the Cultural Revolution in Mao's China. Artists were targeted. Artists were targeted because they couldn't be free to express themselves. They can only express themselves according to what government wanted. So here we got this guy Dashiell Hammett, who claims to be an artist and wants free expression, but in the utopian world that he wishes us all to live in, as we're experiencing today, there's a great deal of censorship going on today. You know, these artists would not have the freedom to do what they demand. What they demand out of society today, you know, and which is amazing to me. If we all lived in a communist country, we wouldn't have neo-noir stuff because it might be out of step. You know, we wouldn't have some of these great movies because they don't match the ideology. You know, and so it's really odd that a lot of these communists or people who did this kind of stuff, you know, they can't see the obvious conflict with how they live their life and how they've achieved and how they want. That's kind of goes back to my comment on this whole, hey, you know, if climate change is a big deal, then sell some of your houses, move into a condo next to mine, live adjacent to some, thoroughfare, and take the bus to work. But, you know, most of the elites won't do that because it's really not for them. It's for everybody else.
Exactly.
Anyways,
you know, Dashiell Hammett, you know, he made millions. But once he got out of jail and he was a commie, his career, he ended up poor and broke when he died.
Well, he got
good.
You know, that's, you know, a lesson, right, dude? Man, if you're going to bite the hand that feeds you,
exactly.
That's what happens, right? Let's see. We got us on the bail thing. Money shouldn't play a role in any justice system. If you're a threat, stay in jail, regardless of wealth. The one issue on bail that I think has given it some legitimacy is just because you're poor and working class doesn't mean you shouldn't have an opportunity to bail out. You shouldn't be kept in. If you're a decent risk, they should let you out. But we had some of those systems in place, as we all know. It's just the truth about what existed before we got rid of bail is elusive because it didn't fit with what the left wanted. Anyways, well, that's for my other show. I think we need to get back to the movie. Hey, let's roll the first. let's roll the first scene, and this is John Huston. We did talk about John Huston already, and but there's other parts of this that I saw in the intro to this, and it's based in San Francisco. Now, this was probably a San Francisco everybody wanted to go to at the time. And, it gives kind of the history. This is the Maltese Falcon. It's, based upon the Knights of Malta and having to pay tribute to the king. And they did it in the golden. And here we go, San Francisco. Now, I'm curious. This is a San Francisco you wanted to go back to, but we don't have a San Francisco that you want to go back to. When's the last time you guys have been to San Francisco? John?
15 years, and I'm not going back.
What about you, Danny?
Shoot, it's probably been 40 years for me. And I mean, but to your point, God, that was the place to go. I mean, it was just such a cool place. And I mean, what a beautiful city it used to be. What was the one of my favorite cop shows was filmed back then. I'm sure John will think of it. Streets of San Francisco.
Streets of San Francisco.
I used to watch that all the time, man. And yeah, just a fabulous show. And I mean, back in those days, if you couldn't appreciate San Francisco and all of the elements of it and around it, then you weren't living. But now, like, my God, I wouldn't allow a family member to go there. I'd do everything I could to stop them and say no, don't. It's just terrible.
Yeah, listen to this one political commentator. He's funny. He says, the best way to defeat a liberal or change a liberal's mind is give them what they want. And they got that in San Francisco. And you know what?
Yeah.
They're toughening on crime now. The new mayor up there is, we're putting task force together. We're stopping the flow of fentanyl. I mean, there's other barriers to them being successful up there, but at least they're talking a little bit of talk and doing some of the work. And they actually warned us in LA. You guys probably don't remember, but when Gascon ran, the leadership up in San Francisco said, "Don't do it. Don't elect that guy. He destroyed our city. Don't elect him."
Yeah.
And I on Twitter I remind people that all the time. Hey, listen, this guy didn't even have the support of the people that he left in San Francisco as prosecutor. They thought he was a bozo, and they told us not to elect him. And then the idiots down here in LA and George Soros money helped get him elected. But we had to say that about San Francisco. I really do hope that the politics turn around in the city up there and in the state, and they can at least bring back some of the great things about San Francisco, because it was once a great city and a jewel of the West Coast, right?
Yeah, we used to go see the Coit Tower and Lombard Street, what is it, the windiest street in the United States. That was always fun. And Fisherman's Wharf, you go get those sourdough bread bowls full of hot, steaming, fresh clams and meat and clam chowder. Oh my God! But not anymore. Now you got to get a shit map to where all the feces is, so you know where not to go and where not to step. That's a fact. They put that up.
There's so many good things about San Francisco, but Ghirardelli's chocolate, dark chocolate in particular, I love that. And, getting the Ghirardelli's chocolate on top of ice cream, all stuff I shouldn't have right now. But, 28 minutes for the first Soros thing. Yes, absolutely. These are three cops, and we're talking about Soros. That punk has done a lot to destroy, the big cities and around the country. I track them all the time. I just did a show where I had somebody from Chicago come on and talk about how they're trying to slide another Soros-funded DA in. So one of the things, the stats that they showed me, 300 more homicides in the city with that idiot over there, Kim Foxx. And here's the question I have to ask for anybody that still supports George Soros and equity. Where's the equity in 300 more murders in Chicago? There is no equity. If you actually do the math from 2014 till 2022 in California. We have 500 more murders per year in 2022 than we had in 2014 when George Gascon wrote his foolish Prop 47 with George Soros Monday, and they got it funded. 500. Where's the equity in 500 more dead people? Because most of those people that are dying in communities of color. Oh, okay. There's my rant. That's a sampling on my other show, Briefing with the Chief, and I get rolling on it. So let's roll the next scene, and this is Humphrey Bogart, and he plays Sam Spade, and he comes in, and he's got these snippy comments, and now, I don't know if you caught this. It was a lot of politically incorrect stuff as he talks to his secretary, John Darling. He calls her Darling. Hey, Darling. Did you catch all that stuff that is now?
Yeah, sweetheart and everything else.
They could do a whole show on policing pronouns and policing politically incorrect. In fact, we ought to recommend it, the movie to the far left, and they can make a movie about a neo-noir movie on policing pronouns and policing politically incorrect language. Nobody will watch it. It'll lose money. But it was the interesting thing was these comments that they say to the women. And the other thing I noticed is making a cigarette. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what'd you think of that, Sam? I thought it was, so this must have been before they had the regular rolled packaged cigarettes. I don't know when the Lucky Strikes and those things came out, but
they still had them. They had them, but you see him later on in the show, but a lot of times he's rolling his own.
Yeah.
And I like the little match dispenser. Pull out a match and you strike it right there. It's on your ashtray.
Yeah, I thought cool. Absolutely. I thought that. What'd you think of the scene, Danny? I thought it was pretty cool. Here she is. She's talking about what's going on and why she wants to hire Sam Spade, but the language and just the difference of the time that he's making his own cigarette.
She's a heck of a dame, ain't she?
Yeah.
So, the language and everything is so different, and it's just fun to listen to that. But I want to give one of my favorite little dialogue sets of dialogue here. It says, so Spade says to her, he says, "Hey, you're not exactly the sort of person you pretend to be, are you?" And she says, "I'm not sure exactly what you mean." He says, "The schoolgirl manner, the blushing, stammering, all of that." She says, I've been bad, worse than you could know." And Spade says, "That's good, because if you actually were as innocent as you pretend to be, we'd never get anywhere."
I know. I love that stuff. That's great. All right. So you're a writer, Danny. That's great. That's great dialogue, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. And, when I read books, that's like, I'll tell you right now, Elmore Leonard is my all-time favorite author of all time,
Very
period.
Good.
And people in the industry and avid readers and people who like Leonard, they call him the king of dialogue. And I think when I started writing, it was kind of I had a heavy Leonard influence, because I've just always I eat that up. Like when I read the dialogue, man, I just really eat it up, and I really appreciate good dialogue, and and that's the one thing that I'll give this movie, and a lot of these old movies is some of the dialogue is just really, really witty, and it's enjoyable.
And they didn't worry about political correctness. Okay, you got to give me the name of that author again, Danny, and spell the last name for the audience.
Elmore Leonard, Leonard.
Okay.
He wrote so many books that turn into movies that everyone would know, like Get Shorty.
Okay.
The TV series Justified is based on his character, the U.S. Marshal.
I love that show.
I'm gonna draw a name on the blank, but he's written books. Back in the 50s or 60s. He's deceased now, but he wrote books that were turned into westerns. And then there's just tons of Jackie Brown, Get Shorty, Bravo. There's just all kinds of movies that were taken from his books, and all of his books. Like I've read everything he's written probably 2 or 3 or 4 times because I can't get enough of him. But it's just the dialogue and getting back on point. the dialogue is what's really going to drive a good story, or whether it's a book or a movie. It's the dialogue that's going to drive it. Action's great, but dialogue is what really captivates most people who are looking for that entertainment.
Yeah, yeah. And the other interesting thing is this is his partner comes in, Miles Archer, who ends up getting it pretty quick here in the movie, which drives Bogart's or Sam Spade's efforts to find out what actually happened. He comes in, and you can immediately tell he's smitten by Mary Astor here, and he plays that that kind of behavior. I mean, he sits right up there on the desk and he's talking to her, right? And I thought, okay, just that alone now would get you in trouble. Oh, he was too interested in me. You got to be professional, and but anyways, you can tell he's smitten with her too. But I agree with you, Danny. And one of the reasons why I like Mulholland Falls, L.A. Confidential, is just that snippy dialogue is so interesting. And I'll have to look for another movie to do like that. And because the last few times I've done those, Danny, I don't know if you'd listen to the show, but I brought on a guy named Buzz Williams, whose dad was on the gangster, or his grandfather started the gangster squad in LAPD, and then his dad replaced his grandfather on the squad. So he has a lot of great history for LAPD, and he's a retired Long Beach cop, but he has a lot of great history on the gangster squad and all that other stuff. And I can imagine the gangster squad, real time guys back in the day, sheriff and LAPD, just having these snippy quips, because you end up doing that with guys because they snip at you. Yeah, I'll give you a typical one. Do you know who I am? I go, yeah, I know who you are. You're the guy that's going to jail. That's one I like to use. But that's good. That's good comebacks, right? Yeah, I know who you are. You're the guy that's going to jail. But that every now and police work kind of lends itself to that to some degree when you're dealing with these, some of these suspects, right? And of course, now you got the video camera. Now you can't really probably say you shouldn't have said that. It's just it escalates it, and the ACLU is monitoring everything and looking at everything, and make sure you get all your pronouns right. But that's where we're at now in policing. But yeah, a lot of that, we did have a lot of snippy dialogue towards suspects when we worked, right, John?
Yep. Well, it goes back to our dark humor that we have on the sheriff's department or police departments. It's how way you cope, and you always talk shit to each other, and it's all in love, because we're all in the same boat.
So, Danny, you use stuff that you used in real life in your books, right? Stuff that you heard from guys, and
Oh yeah. Well, people say, hey, is are any of these characters based on anyone or or any of these storylines, kind of based on something you've experienced? And I admit, I said, hell yeah, because truthfully, there's no way in the world anyone could create more interesting characters than the characters, that we work with, right? I mean, every cop can think about some of the guys they worked with and just think, my God, they should make a movie about that guy, and of course you can't make up stranger situations than some of the stuff we've seen. Like, I think I don't know who originally quoted this, but my good friend and former Lieutenant Deke Slocum used to say, the world's a circus and cops get a front row seat, and that's true. So we see things that people couldn't imagine. And of course, in the 80s, back before, when I was working patrol down Firestone, my training officer used to say, man, if we could just film some of this stuff, and it would be, unbelievable to the rest of the world. Well, of course, as time went on, that's what people started doing. And then you had YouTube and everything else. And yeah, people are amazed. They're watching these gangsters, play Russian roulette, shooting each other in the foot. I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen that video, but it's just unbelievable. The other guy gets shot in one foot, and then the video cuts after he's done hopping around, and he comes back a little while later. They're back on. He's back from the hospital, and his foot's all wrapped up, but they're going to go round two, and he loses and gets shot in the other foot. And his buddies are laughing hysterically. And one of the guys says, now both your feet are effed up. I mean, it's insane. But the point is, had you and I told someone a story like that 30 years ago, they would have thought,
No
No,
way.
you're
Yeah.
full of shit. You're making it up. Now you can go on YouTube and see. We're not making it up, people. I mean,
Yeah,
there was
ain't
just
that
some
the truth?
insane stuff.
And more
Yeah.
of it's coming with the body worn cameras. You know, John and I both worked at West Hollywood. I can tell you, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, it put a lot of those people in some really interesting situations, just to say the least. And most of them are not fit for this show, which I try to maintain parental guidance on there. We kind of keep it reined in. But yeah, it's amazing what people will do just to have sex with somebody else, and it doesn't always necessarily
Oh, let me
mean
tell you. Yeah, I just
somebody
want
else
to
of
put
the
a little snippet
opposite
in.
sex. You know.
Yeah. I want to give a little shout out to Danny. I read that book, Unwritten Rules, and I have to tell you, during that dialogue and everything, reading it, I pictured one of my bosses, one of my sergeants, one of my lieutenants. I retired as lieutenant. I pictured some of the females I worked with and some of the deputies I worked with. And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what went on. So
Yeah.
it's there.
All right, let's get into our next scene. I mean, we could talk about this stuff all day, the dialogue and what we
True.
lived with it. Yeah. So Miles Archer is dead. So here, this is the big thing. Miles volunteers to follow Mary Astor, her character, and of course he pays in the end. He's ultimately killed, and this puts Sam Spade and Humphrey Bogart's character on a mission to find out what's going on. And when he initially finds out, he seems to be almost, I don't want to say aloof, that's probably not the right word, but he does not appear to be emotionally impacted by it. He immediately says, keep his wife away from me. He had a previous thing with her, and just he just not, he doesn't react the way I would expect somebody who lost a partner to react. But really what he did is he got into business mode. He really did react. His way of reacting was, all right, I got to find out who did this. I got to take this down. And he doesn't really say it till the end of the movie. He says, when your partners go down, you got to do something about it, right? And so that's what I saw in this scene. Miles gets killed. He gets waken up. He immediately goes into action, as all of us would do. Now, he's a private detective. I'm assuming he had some law enforcement experience. He has some connections with the police. But that's what I noticed. He got right into business mode. He didn't let this emotionally impact him. He got right into business mode, and he started going in the investigation phase. What do you think, Danny?
Well, I'm gonna, rather than answering your question, because you hit on something that was just to me just a really poignant part of the movie, and that's about him talking about the partner being killed. And I mean, I just think this is heavy stuff, man. But I'm going to read it to you. He says, "When a man's partner is killed, he's supposed to do something about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference what you thought of him. He was your partner and you're supposed to do something about it. And it happens when we're in the detective business. Well, when one of your organization gets killed, it's bad. It's bad to let the killer get away with it. Bad all around. Bad for every detective everywhere." And I thought, man, that is so cool. That was one of the greatest lines in the movie, I thought.
Yeah, it was, and you don't really realize that he isn't. He's on a mission, which is really what he ends up explaining later. And whatever he has to do, whether that's romancing Mary Astor here to get the information he needs, or play these crime partners off against each other, which he does. It ultimately, the mission is to find out who killed his partner, and probably his friend, even though he says doesn't matter, whether you like him or not. They obviously seem to have a friendship going on. What do you think, John?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And somebody just asked the question. No, that was not George Kennedy. But no, you're absolutely right. But it was funny because Sam Spade had an affair with his partner's wife, and he was more like, and she even thought maybe Sam killed him.
Yeah.
But he wasn't as, to me, as distraught about it as I thought he should have been. And more,
yeah, at first. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's I don't know, Danny. You're rolling to well, either one of you guys. So let's start with Danny. You're rolling to a shooting. Somebody, a friend of yours, or somebody's been shot that wears a uniform. Your job isn't to do a lot of motions about it. Your job is to get it's business. That's what this is. You got to turn off the emotion. It's something that we pay for later, but you got to turn off the emotion and you got to get to work, right?
You got that right, Chief. You definitely, you keep it at bay, and I think what you just said, that we pay for it later, is absolutely 100% true. And yeah, I've been to too many of those scenes and been involved in too many of those deals. But I don't know. It's game time when you're rolling, and it's game time for the next however many hours or days that you're the detective investigating this stuff. And sometimes you felt, cold and callous, and sometimes it was even awkward, and a little bit unrelated, but a similar type of thing is on 9/11 of 2001. I was working on a case, and I had all these things going. It was a no body murder case, and we just had this intense lineup of things that we're doing. And the one thing, working homicide, you never had enough time. That was any homicide detective would tell you, there's just not enough time in the day or days in the week, and etc. And here on 9/11, after a few hours, and I wrote about this in my memoir, a few hours of the morning, sitting there watching TV and crying about what's going on to our nation, my partner and I went out and hit the streets again, and we're doing this canvas. We're trying to find some witnesses, and we're going from one home to another, and every home had the TVs going, and it's, these planes are crashing into the towers over and over and over, as we all remember, the loops.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the media loop, and it just felt surreal, because the world is literally upside down, and we're standing there, needing to ask, when's the last time you saw your neighbor, and did you notice if her car was there yesterday? And it almost makes you feel, I can't even really explain it, but I think it's on point. It's like you have to kind of, even though it seemed cold and callous, we had to keep going. We had to do our part. There was nothing we could do for our brothers in New York, as much as it crushed us to know what they were going through and to see what they were dealing with. But there was nothing we could do, so we had to keep moving forward in our world.
I know Johnny B was in
right.
New York and he jumped in to help. I don't know if you were aware of this, but you can't get sad. So Johnny B, you're a sergeant or lieutenant. You get
I was a
some.
sergeant at the time.
Yeah, well, you're at a scene, and you got all these deputies, many of them young, haven't been through anything like this. You have to corral them and get focused. And when you got a deputy involved shooting, or some serious crime case that you're dealing with, maybe multiple fatalities or a kid getting killed, you got to yank the chain and get these guys moving. So we catch the guy. We got to be a Sam Spade at the time, right? We don't have time for,
Absolutely.
and when you were in New York, same thing, like, okay, I'm going to do my part. You just got to pull it together and go and do what you can do. Right.
Yep. You have to, when I was in the conference in the Marriott, we saw the first building come down, and I just told, there was 10 people at our table. There was like 1,500 people at this conference, and a lot of women from all over. And I said, there's dead cops and firemen. And they all looked at me and go, how do you know? And I explained to them. I had to explain to them. I was upset, but then they evacuated us and we came out. And then we, Dennis and I headed on down to help out.
So we got to quit. Well, you have to just put the feelings away and get to work. So Danny, I think you did some private investigation work after you retired, and we have the comment here. What do they think? A lot of the private investigators are former cops, or they narrow. Like I think we have, if you're working for an insurance company, you're probably a very narrow expertise. But what do you think? Are they incompetent? Are they as good as the cops? You want to answer that question?
I would say it's kind of like, how are the cops? I mean, it's a mixed bag. You've got good and you've got bad. For the audience, when I left law enforcement, I started a PI business. I really had no intention of doing so. And I, to be honest with you, I hated ever telling anyone I was a private investigator. And you know, and I felt like a lot of the people in my industry, especially in Idaho, where I started my business, it's an unlicensed state, so anyone can just be a PI. And so there were some real, yeah. Well, there's 6 states in the nation where there's no licensing. You just hang a shingle out and say I'm a PI. So especially when I started, there was just a bunch of idiots that were doing the job. I mean, I knew of 2 who were convicted felons that were working as PIs here in the Boise area. Changed a lot over the years. In fact, there's a in my state there's an association that's kind of helped you know, bring some professionalism to it and make it a more legitimate career. But I kind of just stayed and did my own thing, and I worked for a lot of lawyers and stuff because of my background, and that's what I did. But you know, to answer that question, you know, there's some great investigators out there, and there's some great cops out there. There's some bad of each. What I can tell you is that cops don't ever call in PIs because they're stuck and need help from some, you know, Bogart looking guy.
That's all
it just doesn't happen. In fact, even as a former cop PI, the cops would usually shun you, you know, when you needed to work, you know, trying to get some documents or a report. You know, they half the time they treat you like shit, and you're thinking, oh Jesus, dude, you know, come on, man. But yeah, there's definitely not a big love fest between cops and PIs.
Well, I imagine competency weeds out the bad ones, and the good ones rise to the top. That's the great thing about
yeah, you hope so.
Capitalism, you think.
If you look at that in the form of movies, though, how many movies have you seen where the PI is the focus and the cops are just freaking stupid? And I mean stupid. You know, and I get tired of that genre because people believe all this crap, and you get cops that are totally oblivious, and the private eye saves the day. You know, it's like, give me a break, come on. But that's the movies. That's how they write it. Depends on who the writer is and who the director is.
You know what I hate worse than that, John, is when they do it with the feds. All the local cops are dummies, and the feds know everything. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, anyone that's worked an agency like ours knows that for the most part, we don't need you. Stay out of our business. You know, that's that. We had a hands-off deal with the feds. You know, they just could stay in their own little frickin' world and do their thing. But, you know, a lot of the small agencies throughout the country, you know, they'll have a homicide in a small town like where I live now, and they bring in the feds because they need that expertise and those and all of the you know, the things that they can bring with them. Yes, but you know, in the sheriff's department, we didn't need them, and we didn't use them.
We didn't need them for anything.
I have a book I'm going to review. It's called True Blue, just like I did with your book, Danny, and it's the FBI whistleblower. But he spent 6 years doing investigations on Indian land, so reservations. And I guess the way it works is the FBI are basically the detective bureau for the reservation. So if they have a murder, a sexual assault, something that requires an investigation beyond the first report, the FBI steps in and does it, and then they file the charges. So I thought, you know, and I'm going to ask them about it, because to me that means it isn't just some financial investigation that you see what the FBI's do, or some kind of political investigation. This is grunt police work, the garden variety stuff that burgs and, you know, robberies, the stuff that you're going to get working the LA County Sheriff's Department, stuff you're going to work in LAPD. It's just this more. And so I'm going to ask him, did this make you well-rounded in comparison to the other investigators who might have just focused on financial crime and other stuff, and see what he says. But it was interesting that some FBI agents actually get that experience, but that isn't the norm.
No. The majority of the people they hire, they're looking for now, especially after 9/11, they wanted people that spoke Farsi, you know, Arabic. They wanted people to work in areas where they had to talk a different language, and they wanted financial people that know finance and accountants that can look at paper and go, oh, this is illegal, and they've done this. None of those are police work for the most part. The only good thing that ever came out of the FBI was Peter Pitches. He was our sheriff.
I don't know. I've heard some stories about him, so I might have to
yeah,
disagree
but
with you
as a
on
sheriff,
that. Some ones that are,
everybody loved
character
working for
issue
him.
stories. But
Well,
let's
yeah,
get
chasing secretaries is one thing, but hey, doing police work, kicking
he
ass,
allowed it.
taking names, yeah, him and Block.
A different era. Unfortunately, they didn't care about pronouns back then. But hey, these guys came from the Depression, probably fought in World War II in Korea, and you know what? The last thing they were worried about was, if your feelings were hurt. Let's go to the next scene. It's called "Help Me," and this is, I wanted to do this scene because I just felt like it was incredible manipulation. Mary Astor's playing every little female card she can to
Oh
get
yeah.
Sam Spade to, help me. I'm helpless. And as Danny, you pointed out, he knows she's a snake, right? But she's doing it. She's doing it, and you can hear it. I'm alone. I'm afraid, and I need help. And so she's pleading to this, and I'm sorry, guys. I'd say 80% of the men would fall for this foolishness on the sheriff's department. I need help. Help me out. In law enforcement, the chance of maybe having some intimate contact, would throw them all off. And she's throwing that out there at Sam Spade, and I just noticed that, and I don't think you see it's much more subtle in today's movies, but it is just out there where she's using her femininity to try and manipulate Sam Spade here, and he ain't having any of it. I think he calls her rattle-brained. I mean, he just which, God, could you imagine calling somebody rattle-brained at work now? But yeah, and he gives it right back to her. But what do you think of the scene, John? This is one a lot of guys would be susceptible to this kind of manipulation even today. But that's what she's doing in the movie, right?
Oh, absolutely. That happens all the time. The problem is you got to be smarter than the average dimwit. Now in the movie itself, her acting was very poor in that aspect when she's trying to play the femme fatale. Oh my God, poor me. But she came from the silent era, and so it was all actions and not really talking, plus the direction. But yeah, in real life, a lot of guys would fall for shit like that. A lot. It's like even when you pull people over. One night I had a female trainee and had her go up to the car. It was a female that we pulled over, and she unzipped her top, had the boobs hanging out. She looks at my finger and goes, "Ah, shit," zipped up her top. So they always try something, and some guys fall for it, and they lose their job.
Absolutely. What was the first thing they said in the academy? I know you guys went through when I went. To be careful of the booze.
The 3 B's: booze, broads, and what was the other one? Booze,
bills.
Broads, and
bills.
Bills, maybe.
Yeah, it was bills. Booze, broads, and bills. Make sure you pay your debts.
Can they still say broads, do you think?
Probably not. But we are evaluating a noir film, so we get to use that snippy behavior here today. It's PG. It's not woke PG. So yeah, we can say that here. But yeah. So what do you think, Danny? Same thing. Hardcore manipulation. You experienced that in your career, right?
Oh yeah. But the thing that's great, one more great line I'll quote, and related to that is at the end, he's telling her, "Hey, if you get a break, you'll be out of Tehachapi in 20 years and you can come back to me." He says, "I hope they don't hang you, precious, by that sweet neck. Yes, Angel, I'm going to send you over. The chances are you'll get off with life."
Good.
And that means if you're a good girl, you'll be out in 20 years. I'll be waiting for you. If they hang you, I'll always remember you. That's a classic.
Yeah. What did you say? You said you would, Danny. I talked to you beforehand. You said you were not sure if you liked this movie, but you love this. You love the dialogue, at least, right?
I love the dialogue. That's the thing. You know what? In fact, here's the thing. Honestly, Chief, if I read this, I'm more of a book person than a movie person.
Right.
So if I read this book, I'd probably like it a lot because of the dialogue. But just the acting and everything, it's just hard to get into a movie from that era for me because it's just so different. It just feels slow, and I don't know. It's tough. I didn't love it.
I agree with that. I saw it as a kid too, and I loved it. And then as soon as Pat asked me, literally 5 minutes later, I bought it for $1.25 on Amazon and watched it. And I'm like, God, this stale acting. I was like, oh my God. But I still love the movie. But I know what you mean. Very slow.
It's the snippy dialogue makes it fun, even though we're watching. So it was made in 41, and here we are. So that's 60, 70, 80, 83 years later, right?
Yeah.
Oh God.
83 years later, and it's so, and if you remember, I think he did Philip Marlowe, very similar kind of stuff, right? He did the movie Philip Marlowe, and you saw this also in Casablanca, where he was kind of had played this kind of snippy, where he played Rick.
But he was a hell of an actor, though.
Yeah, well, but back to this whole manipulation, though, and so we got to do our public service announcement for police officers and deputy sheriffs. Don't fall for this stuff, guys. People get in trouble; they get fired for this stuff. Women suck them in, and they do things that they wouldn't normally do because they're not thinking with the right brain here, and they get in trouble. So what did you see, John? Here, oh, yeah.
Your text there from Ariel Ballet.
Well, thank you, Ariel. We appreciate you telling us that. And she's basically saying,
"Thank you, Ariel, and we'd like to have you on the show next time, please."
Clothing is a must, though. I'm sorry, I'm like, this is PG here, so. But and the next scene I really wanted to get into is Peter Lorre, and this is what I named the scene. And he comes into the scene, and he's an interesting guy. Now he's been in. He actually visits Sam Spade. He tries to buy an object. Oh wait, we're running up on a break, right? Yes. Martine, okay, sorry about that. Let's do the break. John, if you got to go potty, now is the time.
Oh, see ya.
Okay, we'll see you in a few minutes.
Yeah, I'm out too.
Okay.
Meet the Seattle Vigilante. Like so many comic heroes, this warrior hides his identity. But his identity isn't the only secret he has to keep. After grievous wounds received during combat, Tier 1 operator John Russell begins to recover and comes to terms with his new reality of being an amputee. And as he learns how to use his new prosthetic limb, he finds himself caught up in the bureaucratic red tape that too many wounded veterans experience, the exhausting medboard process. Out of sheer frustration, John takes it out on the criminal scum of the city. But when reality kicks in, John realizes he's started something that's having an impact on the greater world around him, and thus has to reevaluate his motives. And moreover, just how far is John willing to go to finish this war he's declared against the criminals in Seattle? And will he even survive? From the creator of IDW's award-winning graphic novel Code Word Geronimo comes a new story about a different kind of warrior, Vindicated Inc., the first of its kind disabled veteran action hero comic. The Vindicated Inc. graphic novel crowdfunding campaign on fundmycomic.com is provided in the description of this video. We hope you become a contributor. Please share this link. Thank you.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Well, they're always talking nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
Welcome back to Morning Coffee with the Chief. Please consider donating to Vindicated there and get their project off the ground. And as you're watching us on YouTube, help us get over that 10,000 subscriber mark by subscribing on YouTube. tube. So hey, the scene, Peter Lorre. Go ahead and roll the scene, Peter Lorre. And I remember this guy watching movies a lot. That was one of my escapes, is watching movies. And he's an interesting guy, but he's also in Casablanca, right? And I think he's in the movie. He's in Arsenic and Old Lace. I think that's the Cary Grant movie, John, right?
Yes.
And since I brought up Cary Grant, do we have that? We have a special coming up on the 18th. I think, is it March 18th? Martine, a Cary Grant special that we're going to be doing here on Pop Culture Minefield. I am probably going to try. That's just in a few days. I'm going to try and log in there because I loved Cary Grant. But so Peter Lorre, he played this great character actor for the most part through his whole career, and he was very busy.
Oh yeah,
he was in a lot of movies, right? And
yeah, well,
right.
He and Sidney Greenstreet, the heavyset fat guy.
Yeah,
they played in probably 8 or 10 movies together, and several with Bogart.
Well, he plays this kind of wimpy guy, but he's kind of like Mary Astor. These are all snakes. These guys are all snakes, and fortunately, we have a very seasoned detective who can figure this out. So, okay, Danny, so you're investigating, you're talking to witnesses, and do you get a over time? Do you get the sense of who the snakes are and who the real witnesses and victims are, just based upon experience?
Yeah, I mean, usually, and I don't think that applies to just detectives. I think every cop's kind of got that. You get it within the first few years of your career, especially for guys like us, right? We start out working in custody, which, is gladiator school, and you learn all the cons. But yeah, for the most part, there's some who are a little bit tough, and some you get thrown off track with. But for the most part, I mean, most of us end up being human lie detectors. That's why the frickin' the kids have so much resentment when they grow up with a cop, a father that's a cop. It's like they try to lie to you, and it's like, no, get out of here with that.
I remember my kids were teenagers, and I told them, hey, I've testified as an expert in just about everything. So when you come home, I'm going to be checking, right? And of course, they didn't do anything, but I just needed to say that, right? Whether it's marijuana, coke, or whatever, alcohol. And I said, but I'm going to check your friends too. And they were like, Dad, you would? I says, hey, I like your friends. I don't want them to get in trouble, so I'm going to be checking your friends too. So make sure they know that. I don't want anybody coming to my house like that stuff. And it is probably the downside of being the child of a cop, but you know what? They do well. Martine, you're jumping in there. You have something to add?
No, I'm using myself as a placeholder so I don't cover up Danny's face.
Well, so first, Peter Lorre did come to Sam Spade's office. He tried to tried to buy some object off him, and Sam Spade, and he's coy. He's not really telling him what's going on. And Sam Spade figures out that there's something that's out there that they're all pursuing. He ends up pulling a gun on Sam Spade or Humphrey Bogart, and Bogart, of course, disarms that. And of course, it's a little gun for a little guy. I'm thinking, yeah, couldn't they get something a little more bigger, a little more intimidating? Of course, he plays this kind of aristocratic looking. There's the gun kind of character, and Sam Spade disarms him, of course, but he's figuring out, Sam Spade's figuring out that these people are all pursuing one item. He still doesn't know the whole story, but he does know that this guy is kind of a dangerous guy. He figures that out right away. What do you think, John?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that gun, it couldn't be any bigger than a 32, probably a 25 or 28 back in the day. But, yeah, he knows there's something going on. But, she's lying up through her teeth, so he still doesn't know what's going on yet.
Yeah, I think this is the famous line that it had happened in this scene or something like that, Danny, where, when you're slapped, you'll take it and you'll like it.
Yeah, I love that. We're watching that. My wife's watching the show with me, and I looked over, I laughed. I said, I'm going to be using that line from now on. Of course. I might have been known to be courageous at times, but I'd never raise a hand to my wife. She'd kick my ass for the next 3 days.
Well, all right, yeah,
exactly, Ariel, exactly.
You're gonna have to do a book that takes inspiration from this movie, just because there's so many fun lines in it, right? And just do that on your forward, lay that as on your forward. Hey, this book is dedicated to all those neo noir or neo writers, and particularly the guy you talked about, Leonard, right? And just and kind of look for some quips that you can throw in there that are fun. But he does disarm him. He is figuring out that that these guys got something going on, and they talk about the fat man, right? So that there's a fat man going on, and they figure that guy out, and that's going to be Sidney Greenstreet coming in, which is interesting. You got this little short guy, and then you got this fat, kind of a Laurel and Hardy kind of thing going on, and then you got our well, yeah, and then you got the princess, who's not really a princess, she's a viper, and she's involved in all this stuff, and they're all trying to do one thing, and he's slowly figuring it out. Sam Spade's slowly figuring it out. I think somebody does mention the Falcon at the time, but they're also getting followed by somebody, right? And that somebody, we can roll right into the next scene. It's called The Little Man, and this was a Wilbur, I think, is the character's name, John. And,
yeah, Elijah Cook Jr.
Yeah, Elijah Cook. And he's been in a lot of stuff too. He's a good character actor too. I don't think he was too short to be a leading man, but he's trying to play this tough guy.
Years, did a lot of movies. In fact, you ever see Shane, the movie Shane?
Yes.
He was one of the farmers, and when Jack Palance first gets into town, he draws on Jack Palance and he shoots him dead right in the mud.
Yeah, he's the guy from the South, right? And he, I didn't realize that was him. Okay,
that's
yeah.
Elijah Cook Jr. Yep.
I think John's a heavyweight movie buff, man. I mean, this guy, he knows his movies, his actors, his directors.
Well, when you're a latchkey kid, that's all you got to do.
I think was his name Alabama or something like that, and Shane or something like that. He was Arkansas,
like
maybe it was Alabama.
Name, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember that. I didn't realize that was him, but I do remember they call him Wilbur, and he's a small guy, but he's trying to play this tough guy thing, right?
Yeah, he did that in a lot of movies, though. He played a lot of bad guys and a lot of little meek, con men type things.
And I just love it how they go to this hotel and they got hotel detectives. So that's a throwback to a different era, right? Where you got the hotel detective. And I imagine they probably had a lot of burgs in hotels, so that's why they needed the hotel detective.
And a lot of them were retired cops, because those cops didn't make shit for money back in those days.
Or they're or they're actually working and they're just moonlighting, right? I mean, that's
exactly. You're right, moonlighting.
But I like how he's Sam Spade talks to him and he's like, "Shove off, I'm going to be Mr. Tough Guy," and he's like the shortest of the three of them here. And so Sam Spade says, "Okay, whatever." Goes over to the hotel detective, says, "Hey, that guy's got a couple guns. Why are you letting him hang out in this area?" And then of course they go and tell him to hit the road. Or was it what is the word they use? Shove off? You got to shove off, mister. And which is what he says to Humphrey Bogart's character, but he just Humphrey, he's not going to be intimidated. "Oh yeah, you're following me around. I need you out of here because I got to take care of business. I'm just going to use the tools that are in my toolbox to get rid of you. Let's see just how tough you are." And of course he wimps away with his tail between his leg. What do you think, Danny?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the hotel detective thing is, I sit there and think, now, what exactly would their duties be? But essentially, I guess it's like they're not. I think detective is used kind of in a broad sense, or maybe because they're plain clothes. But truthfully, I think that the
We lost you, Danny. I think we lost your sound. We lost your sound, Danny. Well, I will tell you, before joining the sheriff's department, I worked security at a hotel, and you had fights or domestic violence stuff going on, and you had to rekey the rooms. There's a lot of things that you had to do, and if you had some guys pickpockets that worked hotels, so you had to look out for the pickpockets. Hey, Dan, are you back with us? Can you go ahead and give us a 1, 2, 3 count? No, I think we lost him. John, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, Danny. Hey, Danny, go ahead and log back out and then log back in with the same link that you had to start the show, and we'll get you back on if that's possible. But you look like you're frozen, so it might be on your end. Maybe the snowstorm is getting to you.
No, he's not frozen.
He's not frozen?
Yeah. But we have no audio. Yeah,
no
so
audio?
It would be a good idea to step out and step in again.
Yep. I don't know if he can hear us, though. Yeah, let's see, try and give him
Danny, can you hear us?
Oh, there you go. He's going out. Okay. Well, let's get back on. So anyway, so I was essentially a hotel detective. I just thought it was interesting because you do see a lot of that stuff doing the older movies, having hotel detectives and people who are doing different kinds of security work. And I did want to answer a question. Somebody said, is Pinkerton still around? It is still around. They are more of a security company than a detective agency. I still think they do private detective work, but they handle contracts where they do physical security in many places. But this little guy, we ran his clip already, Martin, right? So it's he had a chip on his shoulder. That was the other thing, John. This guy always had a chip on his shoulder in this movie.
Yep.
So
little guy syndrome.
and we see that. I mean, it's funny. When I was working, sometimes the littlest guys would fight the hardest because I think they had something to prove when you're trying to take somebody to jail. You know, the bigger guys, lots of times they just go along, but the little guys, they always had to fight you because they always had to prove. It was a challenge to their manhood, and you kind of see that in this movie. And he had an odd relationship with Sidney Greenstreet here. I was like, yeah, there's something going on with these two guys. It isn't just a father-son relationship is kind of how I saw it. Hey, Danny, you back with us? Can you hear me? Well, his mic is off. Your mic is off if you can't hear me. So turn your mic on. Nope. Okay. All right. Well, the next scene is, it is, the character name for Peter Lorre is Cairo, which is kind of interesting. Makes it a little, and they did come from Turkey, right? All these people were in Turkey trying to get the Maltese Falcon off some Russian general, and that comes out, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what this scam is all about. And so that's why you got these interesting characters. This guy's name is Cairo, and then now we have the fat man that kind of enters into the movie. And let's roll that scene, the fat man. And in this scene, they all kind of come together in the room, and a lot of this show ends up, or this movie ends up being where they end up being all together. But here's where he originally meets the fat man, who's trying to negotiate for the Maltese Falcon, believing that Humphrey Bogart has it or knows where it's at. And it becomes clear that Cairo was acting on his behalf to try and get the Maltese Falcon as well. And that ultimately you find out that Mary Astor was working for them as well to convince the Russian general to give up the Maltese Falcon to her. And so these guys were all conspirators, and she betrayed them basically by leaving.
Exactly.
With the Maltese Falcon. And this is all about them pursuing her to get it. And she doesn't actually physically have it on her. And some guy that she had managed to get into her web, Thursday, I think his name is, he ends up getting killed. But they do find out that she does actually have the Maltese Falcon. Danny, are you back with us fully? Check your mic. I can hear something. Can you hear me, Danny? Okay. Well, your mic is off. Your mic is off now, so you might want to turn that up. So here's Sidney Greenstreet, great character actor. John, what else has he been in? I remember him primarily from this movie.
Well, he was in Casablanca along with Peter Lorre. They did 8 to 10 movies together. He always played a heavy, the bad guy, the kingpin.
Well, I'll have to. it's kind of outside of the genre here of this show is Casablanca, but I'm trying to remember his character in there, who he played, but what his goal was, but he is in cahoots with Joel Cairo, or that's Peter Lorre's character, and he's trying to negotiate with Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart realizes that he's a snake as well, but Sidney Greenstreet acknowledges that Humphrey Bogart's not going to be somebody to easily sway. That Humphrey Bogart knows what's going on, and he's a little crafty himself. And you can tell that he kind of appreciates that he's dealing with somebody who's a step above who he's been dealing with, I guess. Do you see that in the scene?
Yes. Yeah. I was just reading up on Sidney Greenstreet real quick. Yeah, he was in Casablanca, and he did 5 films total with Bogart and 9 with Peter Lorre.
Wow.
And three films that all 3 of them were in together. And then later on, he played on the radio Detective Nero Wolfe. But he was an English actor and became an American citizen in 1925.
Well, he's right. Well, and he realized that. Well, no, okay. So what character did he play in Casablanca? That's what I'm trying to remember.
Casablanca, I'll tell you. Let me bring that up. It's in here somewhere. I'll have to find it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a good actor. I love the way he laughs, in
right.
this movie.
Yeah.
But that's how he laughed in every movie he was in. So it wasn't that's what he is. That was his thing. But he played a lot of bad guys in that.
Well, in this show, they realized that Cairo was trying to bribe him with $5,000 to get the Falcon, and Humphrey Bogart's character. There you are, Danny. Welcome back. And can you hear us? Yeah, he can't hear us. We can hear him. So, Danny, we can hear you when you hear us, and so Humphrey Bogart is realizing that the value of the Falcon clearly is more than human life, that people are willing to kill for it. So it is very valuable, and he's not willing to be bought off with $5,000. He's not even willing to be bought off for $10,000. So he's putting the pressure on Greenstreet. You want this? I know where to get it, or I know how to get it, even though he probably doesn't know that yet. He's putting it all together, and so this is just interaction between 2 smart guys trying to get something. Bogart's trying to get information. Sidney Greenstreet's trying to get the Falcon for as little price as possible. Is the way I see this scene.
Oh,
do you
absolutely.
See it? Absolutely.
Sorry about that, guys. I had major technical issues occur, but I think I'm back.
Was it the snow?
No, it was these earbuds. I don't know what happened, and I scrambled around trying other earphones. I just couldn't get it to work, so I apologize.
Okay. That's okay.
Hear you fine now, brother.
Well, we're
What's
dealing
that, John?
Hear you fine now.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we were just going over the fat man here, Sidney Greenstreet, and his mental gymnastics with Humphrey Bogart, and Bogart is trying to get information out of him, and Sidney Greenstreet's trying to get the Maltese Falcon. He pretty much tells him what's going on with the Maltese Falcon, and he's trying to get it out of Sam Spade here, believing that he has it with as little price as possible. So when you're doing interviews, obviously a lot of guys thought they were smarter than they were. When you're interviewing some guys for a homicide or other crimes, Danny, did you ever run across that guy, somebody that just thought so much of themselves and thought they were smarter than you, and that kind of thing in the interview?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, I hate to say it, but most of the guys that you're going to be dealing with, they're cons for a reason, and they think they got everything figured out, and of course they try to go through life with their shortcuts. But yeah, you typically you could feel it, if not know it for a fact that they think they're the smartest guy in the room, and that made the challenge fun. You know what I mean? Right. But one of the things I learned early on, one of the best things that you can do is to not only record your interviews, but listen back to them. And then after that, you learn to shut the hell up, because most guys doing interviews, they talk too much. You know what I mean? Ask the questions, but don't do all the talking. Let that guy do the talking. So
that's exactly right.
And they will.
Yeah. Let them talk.
People don't believe that. If you just warm up a little bit and just get them going, and most people will talk, even though they have a right to remain silent. And defense attorneys drives them crazy. Even seasoned criminals will talk with you, right? Because they're thinking they can manipulate the situation, right? Just like in the scene.
They're smarter than you are.
Right? Well, the biggest thing is you have to have established a rapport to get people to talk to you. And you see it on TV. The first thing the cop does is read someone their rights. Well, you might as well not even show up for the interview, because if that's how you start the interview, it's just too cold, and it just isn't going to work. You got to have a little foreplay. Excuse the expression, but I would find something to connect to a guy, and you can always find something. No matter how far apart your worlds are, there's always something that you can use to connect to a person. And I mean, there were times where I could talk for 10, 15 minutes with a guy before we ever even, get around to why we're sitting in that room together. And they know why we're there. And, they know eventually I'm going to ask them about some things, but it's just kind of a different deal. If you get them talking a little bit about whatever, their dog, or, their car, or football, or whatever, then eventually you're gonna kind of go into the, okay, hey, look, there's something that happened out there, and it's my job to figure it out, and I've had some people tell me this happened, and other people that happened, but I'd like your version, and before we go on, I need to advise you of your rights. Now that is completely legal, and it's within all the parameters of the Miranda warning, but you don't see that on TV. They sit down and go, read them their rights. Well, they're just not going to talk to you if you do that.
But they also talk to you because they're trying to get information out of you, right? That does happen with suspects. They're trying to see how much you have, right? Which is what you see with the Fat Man here and Humphrey Bogart. They're trying to get information out of each other in this conversation without giving up a lot of information, right?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes that's exactly what they do, and if you're smart enough to recognize that that's going to be the case, you can actually kind of play that game. I've taken in props, what I call prop, and have something that they can sit there and read, like a case file that on an unsolved murder I'm working on, but I print on the folder, that's solved, and the weapons recovered, and all these things that aren't true, and I leave it sitting there so that it's giving this guy a psychological, he's looking at it going, wait a minute, his folder says it's solved, says they got the gun, and now you've put that pressure in there, and they think, okay, well, I'm learning from this guy. Well, you're not really learning. You're being, you're getting hooked and reeled.
Yeah, I was teaching. We were teaching. I think John was still with me when we were trying to teach our guys how to talk to people, to put a cognitive load on them so that they're likely to trip up. And there's a strategy for doing that in the context of Homeland Security, and just talk. And you have to be successful in detecting somebody who's doing a terror. You have to practice that skill every day, is what I taught them. And I said, what we said to them. So when you go out and do your fare evasion, or you're just contacting people who are up to no good or appear to be suspicious, you practice those techniques every single time, and you get better at it. And people, they stumble. Like, we had one strategy. We would put uniformed guys on a train, and then we would have plainclothes guys on the train, and they'd just watch to see how people reacted, right? And then the people who reacted negatively to the uniforms, those are the people we talk to, and then we practice this whole interviewing technique, and we're getting people who were running dope. They'd come in on a Greyhound, they'd hit the transit system, and they were taking dope or money to and fro, and we got a lot of guys with warrants. And so that stuff actually works. It actually works, and if you practice it and you teach your folks how to do that, how to talk to people, let them do their run. If it's somebody that's telling the truth, they're just going to run on like I am, right? If it's somebody that's trying to hide stuff, they're going to short answers, and there's strategies to look for, and there's ways to put load on them to get them to speak up, and that is a skill, right, Danny?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the deal on the train. When I was working the crime impact team out of Firestone, we would have unmarked cars and work undercover doing things like that. It was always fun if you were like in a certain area and a radio car goes by, to drop in behind them a few car lengths back and watch the people as the cops pass, because it's the same thing. You can see how people look and how they react to the presence of the cops, and of course they aren't paying any attention to you at all. So if you got really lucky, after the cops went by, they'd turn around and get their gun back from their girlfriend or something.
Right.
But it's the same type of a thing.
So somebody said I would play a good Batman. I don't know about that. I will tell you, during the Northridge earthquake, we got rocked. I was up in Sylmar. I got hit in the head with something. I had a concussion, but I kept my shoes near the bed, my jeans and my shoes. I put it on and all that stuff, and I go to find a flashlight, and I come back to the master bedroom, and my wife says, "Wait, where's the flash? How come you get a? It's in the front. It's in the drawer." And nothing's in the drawer anymore, right? But my son had this basket of toys right next to the door. Wasn't very far from our bedroom, and I reached in, I grabbed his flashlight, and it was the Batman flashlight with the Batman symbol, and that was the flashlight we used to get out of the house and not step on stuff. Was the little Batman single flashlight that my son had in his toy box, and I think I want to say he was 5 and my daughter was 4, but yeah, we got out of our house. Unfortunately, our neighbor had a RV with a generator, so get everybody in some get them out of the weather and into something that was warm. But yeah, thank you. I don't think I would be a good Batman, but I did have a Batman story for you. So let's get on let's get on to Knights and Falcon, and this is interesting. This is where they're talking. He ends up slipping him a Mickey in this. He's realizing he needs Humphrey Bogart out of the way. And if he's out of the way long enough, I'm surprised they didn't kill him in this scene, but he needs him out of the way long enough so that he can get his hands on the Falcon. And so now they're just talking and having I don't want to say a friendly conversation. This is another one of those conversations where it's a cat and mouse conversation. And they're essentially making a deal, and he's telling them all about the Falcon and the Knights of Malta and the Crusades and all that other junk. And he's talking about this and where it was at and how they were trying to get it and why and he's been chasing this Falcon for 17 years. This is what Sidney Greenstreet ultimately tells him. But he slips him a Mickey. Do you ever use the slipping a Mickey in your books there, Danny?
No, I'm not that noir.
Well, you're going to have to. When you do this tribute to the original noir, and when you write your next book, you got to slip them a Mickey, and you got to talk. You got to talk actually in not woke language, which you probably already do anyways. But he does end up. He tells the whole story, and I like how they how long would it take nowadays to tell this story? But ultimately, they got to tell the story of the Maltese Falcon so everybody understands the value of it and why these guys are willing to kill so many people to get it. Right. So, John, what'd you think? Good scene?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, he passes out, and then they go do their business on that boat. But, yeah, pretty good scene. Good back and forth.
Well, of course, we're talking, if you see, this is a smoking jacket, right? I think that's what they call this, right, John? Yep. Different era, and you look at the, whatever that is, what's that, a tea set or coffee set that's on the table there, all silver. Another different era kind of stuff, right? I mean, now to use that stuff, they'd use all these props for a period piece now, but that was the way it was back then. Yep. I don't. Do they even sell smoking jackets today anymore, John?
Oh, yeah, they do. Supposedly, that's where all the smoke goes, and then you take it off, and you don't smell like that's bullshit.
Oh,
you still smell like cigarettes.
Yeah. Now it's marijuana smoking jackets.
Exactly.
I forget. I was on maybe it was my regular show. I said something that I think it's just a mistake. All this legalized marijuana in 20 years, we're gonna be paying for it, and some anti-cop cow made some comment to me on Twitter, but it's like, hey, I mean, we did everything we can to minimize smoking. We've done everything we can to kind of contain the abuse of alcohol. But hey, let's legalize one more mind-altering drug and push that and say it's the cure-all for everything. And then 20 years from now, we'll be going, why the heck did we do that, right? But I guess the smoking jacket for marijuana is probably a bib because you got to go eat, right? But well, hey, listen, I'm giving you some good material, Danny, for your books in the future here today. I used to have a lot of guys work for me, and people would tell me that worked closer to me. They get asked all the time, "What's it like to work with Jordan?" Right? Because I had kind of a quiet demeanor, right? And then John would tell me, "So yeah, he's a great guy. He's hilarious," but I didn't open up to everybody, man. It was the people that worked closest with me knew me and knew what I was about. But it was, I was always in business mode when I was at work, and only when I got a chance to relax at work did the guys closest to me, like John, because he was my ops lieutenant for a couple of years, right, John?
Yep.
And then he worked closely in operations when I was a commander there. So so the people around me got to see my sense of humor. I mean, that was, I didn't express it very much with everybody, but I guess
it's like you and Dan, two different sense of humors, both deadpan, both slower, but both hilarious. Some of the shit that comes out of you guys' mouth was hilarious.
Most people don't know this, so I guess I'll share. When I was in high school, in addition to playing football, I did competitive speaking, but I didn't do debate or any of that kind of stuff. I did comedy and drama. So, and the way competitive speaking worked is you either did like where it was just you by yourself, or you with a partner, or maybe you with a group, and you would do some kind of skit, either comedy or drama, and then you would compete in those categories with other teams, and they would have judges and things like this. And the first year we did it, we were absolutely terrible. It was a bunch of jocks that got recruited to go into this by a football coach. And we decided, well, you know what, we're going to put as much into this as we put into our sports. So we had a couple of football players. I was a football player, a swimmer, a tennis player, and then one kid who was a freshman who didn't play sports. And we ended up winning the state of Michigan for what they call the multiple division. But it was comedy. We did comedy. We won on comedy. But I was the straight guy. I would deliver a line, and then somebody would deliver the punchline. So I wasn't really the guy delivering the punchlines. But it was a fun experience, and ultimately, the ability to speak publicly worked out well for me later on in my career, because that people figured out I was not a bad public speaker. And let me tell you, Danny, as soon as they figured out that I could actually speak and give a presentation, I was recruited by people to speak everywhere in the department. And then I started flying around the country to speak. I spoke on so many different issues, and a lot of it is really your delivery, how you deliver and that kind of stuff. But I did comedy, believe it or not. Most people wouldn't know that, but that was my first success. And the first time we did it, we were terrible, absolutely terrible, and because we went to a keg party the night before. I mean, we were in high school, and that was a rite of passage in the Midwest. And then we decided, okay, I guess we can't be hungover when we do this stuff, and so we ended up. So that was my from jock to public speaker story. All right, so let's get on to the next show, and this is The Falcon Arrives. And it took me a while to figure this out, but who delivered the Falcon? But somewhere along the way, and this is obviously movie craft, that he's reading the paper and he sees some ship is coming from Istanbul. He knows they were in Istanbul, and our detective figures out that the one ship coming from Istanbul probably has the Falcon on it. So this is a lot of I would used to call it TV ESP, right? They show this article and he figures it out, and that's the clue that, okay, it's going to be on the boat, and everybody knows it's going to be on the boat. That's why he got drugged, right? Because they all figured out that's where it's going to be. And but he doesn't know that it's, yeah, I mean, he has an idea that's where it's going to be, but I don't think at that time, because otherwise he'd have been there, right? But the captain of that boat ends up stumbling in his office. We found out later he had been shot by Wilbur, and he has the Falcon. He was recruited by Mary Astor to deliver it to her. She didn't have it at the time when they were all pursuing her for it. And he ends up bringing it to Sam Spade's office. And now he's got the Falcon. And of course, his lady friend sees this too. And I really like her. He just calls her darling, or don't get upset. He just uses all these terms that would get us all in trouble today with his secretary. I don't know if you remember some of those, John, but yeah, he's darling or sweetheart. I think he used that. Could you imagine calling your secretary sweetheart on the sheriff's department today?
Oh, God.
Oh, he would hate that. There's my non-politically correct response.
Hey, I'm telling you something. They took the fun out of the workplace. I'm telling you right now. You can't say shit anymore. Even when I retired, it was like, oh my God.
Hell, it's so bad.
They'll come out of my mouth was hun. Thanks, hun. I'm like, oh shit. And here comes the sure enough, and I hear about it, I'm like,
all right, so John said something at work that it just put me in a tough spot because it was reported to me, and I was his boss, right? And so what do you have to do? You have to call the policy of equity people. And I told John, I'm not going to call him John. I says, you're going to call him. So he calls it on himself. He says, oh yeah, this is who said it? Well, I did.
Yeah, I remember that.
So I made him call in on himself. He said something he shouldn't. He called some sergeant a name that he shouldn't call them. That is not politically correct. And it got reported to me. And I said, John, I'm not going to report you. You're going to report yourself. And so he ended up calling himself into the equity unit and declared that he said something inappropriate. And you got a chuckle from them on that, right, John?
Oh, yeah. They're like, what? You did it? Why the hell are you calling us? Oh, it was hilarious.
Well,
basically the end of it.
That was the end of it. I had somebody else got in a mess with that stuff, and it wasn't reported to me. The person was making a report, and I said, tell them to report it themselves. Completely changes. If you're in something like that and you call in and say, hey, I made a mistake, this is what I said, this is what's going on, because the first person who gets in there to file that complaint is the victim, right? And if you make a mistake and you call in on yourself, right, I mean, it's done, right? And so I use that.
Don't worry about
I
it.
used that a few times, right? And it really came out really well for the person who was getting reported on. But that's so it was my way of manipulating the process. I just say, all right, Danny, you just said that in front of me. You got about 5 minutes to call in on yourself, or I got to call in on you, right? And I remember when he says, well, you want me to call him myself? I go, yeah.
I'm like, what?
It worked out really well. So, but in this case, so he's got the Falcon. Now he's got the valuable device here, and he eventually gets all of these folks in the same room together, which is the next scene, and it really probably is the best scene. Let's see what we got here. But how many are really willing to correct themselves, though? Pride and fear are of plenty to stop them. You know what? I think when you understand the logic of what I'm asking them to do, it diffuses the situation for them. Because when they started that whole equity stuff where they're policing all this, everything you said, it was like, oh my God, it was death if you got reported, right? Your career was over with and all that other stuff. But when you start policing pronouns and you start policing what people say at the workplace, suddenly you have volumes and volumes of investigations you're doing, right? And you start to begin
stupid, inane bullshit.
Yeah, and you begin to categorize things. Suddenly, minor things that were, they made mountains out of early on become, okay, yeah, we've heard that like 1,000 times before. You're gonna get a slap on the wrist and you move on. They started putting things into context, right? This is human interaction. These things happen, and it's funny because I don't know if you guys are aware, but they spread the equity unit to all county departments. And suddenly the sheriff's department looked pretty golden. We're a paramilitary organization. If you tell us to march, we're going to do a little better. But you know what? When you start doing DCFS and you start doing all these other county departments who are perceived as being enlightened, you find out they're not so enlightened. And pretty soon the sheriff's department cases look pretty mild in comparison to what is going on at probation or what is going on at DCFS or what is even going on in public health services. I mean, that some of the nurses say, suddenly the panel now became more a county panel instead of focused on the sheriff's department. And we towards the end, you'd go in with cases like, this is no big deal. We have all these other cases that we're dealing that were much more priority. So we actually did pretty good on the sheriff's department. I think even before they started that whole foolishness just for us alone. And I thought it was ironic because people who were our biggest critics didn't know how to keep their mouths shut. Right? They would say a lot of the same stuff. So we got 2 more scenes to go over here. Let's jump into all together, and this is where they get them all together in a room, and you really kind of see the interplay. You realize that they're all conspiring to get this Falcon, and Sam Spade gets them all in the room, and actually he's not all that worried about it, and he starts playing one off against the other, which I thought was great. He goes, okay, yeah, 25,000, but we got a few dead bodies going on here, and
we got to give them somebody.
We got a fall guy, and we need a fall guy, right? And it's not going to be me. So in addition to the 25,000, I want a fall guy. What do you think, Danny? What do you think about this clear effort by him to divide them? I mean, that happens when you're interviewing and dealing with suspects, co-defendant.
Yeah, it's cases, a good tactic. Right? It usually works better if they're not all together when you're doing it. I could picture having separate interview rooms, and in fact, you mentioned earlier you guys did LA Confidential. That's a classic. The going from one interview room to the other and working one suspect against the other. But yeah, I mean it's a tactic, just not usually in a group effort.
I like how it's. Let's just give him Wilbur here, right? We'll give him Wilbur, the small guy, the guns with. And I didn't mention it looks like he was carrying 45s for a small guy, 2 45s. I mean, he probably added 25 pounds to his weight there. And of course, you can only carry, and then he carried them in his pockets, not on holsters, which was kind of an interesting thing to me. That you wear a hole in the pocket pretty darn quick, probably in the first week. So looked cool, but. As we all know, as guys who carried guns, not really practical. But I like how, hey, let's give him Wilbur. And Sidney Green says, oh, well, we can't do that. He's like a son to me. Ultimately, he says, yeah, we'll give Wilbur. But and then he switches to Peter Lorre, right? Let's give Peter Lorre. And of course, he pushes back and he says, well, I'm all for giving up the lady here too, if you think we can work it out, right? So they're already divided anyways. These people are all working in their own interests. Sidney Greenstein kind of feels like he's got control over him, but he probably doesn't really, as we saw with Barry Asher. We find out she was hired to romance the Russian general, had the Falcon and get away, and she betrayed him. And there's no doubt in my mind if Cairo would have gotten it for 5,000, he would have betrayed the Fat Man here. And if Fat Man didn't have to pay any of these guys, and it could have gotten the Falcon without them. But these are all greedy criminals, and there's no honor amongst thieves, right, John?
Yeah, exactly. But the best part, he's talking about giving up Wilbur, who has 2 45s on him. In today's movies, he just come out and shot that guy right there.
Yep. Yep. That would.
Fuck you.
Well, yeah, and here he is. Here's our guy. Me? What are you talking about? And that's the other thing, Danny. There is no honor amongst thieves. And you said something earlier that she's a con. These are all cons, and these are grifters. That's who they are. That's their life, right?
Yeah.
And they're willing. How much did it take for you to flip guys to give up on the other guy if they felt it was in their best interest?
Yeah, I mean every case is different, but certainly everyone is ultimately going to look out for themselves. And there's there's the hardcore guys that know that, it doesn't do them any good to be a snitch, and they know how to do time, and they're going to keep their mouths shut. And in that gang culture, that's pretty hardcore, especially when you look at the heavyweights, guys that are, part of the MA, or they've been in and out of the joint. They know they're just going to keep their mouths shut and do their time. They're not going to tell you anything.
Right.
And okay, you did mostly homicide, but when you're dealing with grifters like this, they're going to roll because all of these guys look like survivors to me, right? So they're going to survive this to move on, and so they will throw a crime partner under the bus if these are just thieves, right? Not necessarily the gang culture.
Yeah, sure, unless they're gypsies.
Yeah.
I had a case there. I worked gypsies for
I read
about
in your
a year.
book. Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, man, those they were as tight-lipped as you could get, and they were almost impossible to track and find. I mean, it became a personal vendetta on my part, but it took me, I think, a year and a half, and I finally got handcuffs on that son of a bitch. And of course, the crimes they were committing, I'm doing all this work, and it's a slap on the wrist. I mean, they do nothing to these people, but they leave in their wake this trail of victims. People, usually it was a lot of the people who were illegal, and they wouldn't even come to the police. And I discovered them through my investigation, but they're the ones who could least afford to be ripped off by these people, and they'd lose their life savings, everything they owned, to these gimmicks of that the gypsies would suck them into. And and it just pissed me off. So I got, like a true bulldog, and just wouldn't let go of that bone until I, had it figured out. But yeah, gypsies, they don't talk. They don't tell on each other. It's a very tight, it's family. They're family. They're all family. They're all related.
Oh yeah. They're all related. Trust me.
Yeah.
And they'll bail on and just ignore the bail and get the heck out of there because they know that. Because we had gypsies that worked West Hollywood, and they would do the whole tar the roof thing, fix the roof thing, and just throw some tar around and say that they did it and charge some old people who didn't know any better. And then we had a bunch of gypsies when I was working. We worked transit. They were pickpocketing. They were hitting the Chinatown area because the older Chinese in particular, carried a lot of cash on them. They carried and so they were hitting them, and they were really hard to work because they understood the system. They knew that they could stay in an area a certain amount of time. If you got somebody who don't know wallets, just dump all the wallets, just keep the cash, shift it to somebody else right away because it was a crew. And these guys, they knew what they're doing. They were career criminals. These guys are career criminals too here. They're just taking a lot more risk because the score is a lot bigger with these guys.
Imagine
the same thing.
Imagine, Chief, how emboldened.
Go ahead, Danny.
I was going to say, imagine how emboldened they are now with Gascon, because you can't. They're not going to prosecute any of those petty crimes, which, of course, you and I, and all of our, the people that are involved in law enforcement, we all know that what that does is it destroys quality of life. You see these videos of everyone doing the smash and grabs and just walking in and stealing everything they want. Well, it's because the prosecutor's not going to do anything about it. And what that does is it destroys quality of life for the average citizen. Gascon doesn't care about it. Neither does,
doesn't at all.
So Chile is extreme South America, and they have Chilean crews coming in here and hitting in LA. And I was talking to a friend of mine, just some buddies that I played football with, and a bunch of them became cops in Michigan. They're getting hit in Michigan from Chilean gangs as well. So the hey, come rip me off sign, is out for the United States. And, I'm with Dummy being George Gascon. And, they're ripping us off blind, and it's funny. They just did a select hearing in the Senate, and it was the wife of Robert Bonta, who is he's the Attorney General of the state of California, but she was doing fact finding to figure out what's going on with retail theft. And I'm like, why don't you just ask your husband? I mean, what do you, because she's in the assembly too. We all know, well, we need data. Well, did you go into your CVS and see that everything's locked up? They just closed the door at my grocery store that is adjacent to the pharmacy area because high-end stuff is there, so that you can't just walk in and rip stuff off and come out again. I mean, why don't you just look around in your neighborhood and see what's going on? But I need data before I can make changes. And I'm like, why can't you just talk to your husband? He'll tell you what the truth is, not what the lie is, what the truth is. And I'm going to have somebody on my other show. We're going to talk about that stupid select committee. But yeah, these guys are manipulating. And finally, Humphrey Bogart, he gets 10 grand up front from Sidney Greenstreet, and he comes up with the Falcon. He has it delivered. He doesn't take it with him because he knows these clowns. He puts it in a package storage place, which is kind of old school. Package storage place, you get the receipt, and then he has his secretary, which he calls, "Hey, sweetheart, can you pick this up for me and drop it off?" "Oh, you're a darling." Uses all the language you can't use today, and he drops it off, and she has it delivered to him, and then he finally gives them the Falcon, and they're all enamored and they're all excited about it. Let's roll that scene, the fake. And so here they are. They're looking at it. They're examining it, and obviously this has been their pursuit, or at least his pursuit, the fat man, Sidney Greenstreet's pursuit, for 17 years, and he's picked up these hanger-ons along the way, and they're all after this. And I don't know if Humphrey Bogart realizes it's fake or not at this point, but he realizes this is probably the dangerous spot for him because they don't need him anymore. He's got their 10 grand in his pocket, and he's just watching them closely at this point. And then, of course, they figure out that this is a fake, which is so appropriate for for the movie in my mind. They spent all this time pursuing this thing, and they got it. They killed Miles. They killed Thursday. They killed the Thursday. They killed
captain.
They killed the ship captain. So they killed 3 people to get this thing, and it's a fake. And they absolutely figured out it's probably lead and not gold, covered with enamel. And they realized that the Russian captain or the Russian general, given how hard they pushed him to try and get it from him, that it was probably more valuable than he thought. And he just made up this fake, and that's what they got here. What'd you think of the scene, John?
Yeah, they were all caught with their pants down. But when he started scraping them with the knife to see if there was gold, and there wasn't, they were all pissed off. Now it's come to shooting time.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, but because he's already got the cops rolling, Danny, right? And so you're writing this stuff. You get to, as you said when I interviewed you, you get to control the outcome here. This was the writer writing the story. He kind of links it all together. He controls the outcome, that it's fake, and that also all of these guys end up going to jail, right?
Yeah, they call that a plot twist. you got to have it. You have to have at least 1 or 2 good plot twists in every story. So that isn't surprising that here all this commotion over this damn Falcon, and it turns out to be fake. That's a pretty good plot twist.
And that's when Humphrey tells her, he turns her in for, she killed the detective, I think, and
yes.
Wilbur killed Thursby. But he says, "Well, when you get out in 20 years, look me up."
Yeah.
Well, if
they don't hang you, and if they hang you, I'll always remember you.
Hey, the funny thing is, when he finally says it, you think, what's that? I could have had a V8 thing. When Miles was killed, they show his face, and he's got a smile on his face, and that should have been that. If you were paying attention, that should have been the clue that it wasn't Thursday who killed him. It wasn't any of these guys who killed him. It was Mary Astor, because he would smile as she approached him. And then he, of course, Humphrey Bogart figures that out. Because Miles is his partner. He knows what he'll allow and what he won't allow, but he will allow her to approach him because he was smitten with her. And of course, she's the one that kills him. Right. Right. And, but that's, we got
lousy dame.
Yeah. Black widows. Well, not really a black widow because they weren't in a relationship, but yeah, killers. There's a show on TV called Snapped where all these women are running around killing people. And I always tell my wife, see, they, they do it too. And of course she's a vicious killer, and she just wants she's in it for greed. This is about money. Now, Danny, have you ever done an insurance case where a wife killed her husband for money?
No, I don't think I have. I mean, I've handled plenty of murder cases where money was a motive, and including with family. I had a really great case that, I mean, tragic, but a great case. It was no body case for a long time, all the way through prelim, and then the body was found. But it was a an elderly woman. It was her daughter and her new husband that they killed the woman, and it was all is financially is a financial motive.
So, oh, yeah. Well, now women don't have to kill their husbands anymore to get the money. They just need to divorce them in California, and
yeah, exactly.
all the cash and prizes roll in. So, so why put yourself at risk? You can get half of it and not have to do anything, right? So, but yeah, it's what I liked about this, and this is, you already brought up the comment. When a man's partner is killed, you have to do something. And when one of our guys is killed in line duty, we take it personal. And this is where you find out that Sam Snead and Humphrey Bogart's character did in fact take it very personal, right, Danny?
Oh yeah, you bet. As well they should.
Right, and of course he gives those snippy comments to Mary Astor's character about, well, if you get out, we can, and that it also realizes that they did have relations, right? They did hook up early in the movie. It's implied in the movie, but not really laid out until the very end. But yeah, John, what'd you think? This final scene.
Yeah, 1940s, but it was a good movie. I loved it, but acting stale, the whole thing, premise. And he had the cops were ready to come in, which is good. The cop that actually slapped him earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
And got away with it.
Well, I like that. The banter between him and the cops were pretty interesting too. Because he didn't pull any punches, and it was always Ward Bond who was the peacemaker between his lieutenant. Which I don't think I've ever had a lieutenant investigate a homicide. Different era, I guess, Danny. They didn't come out with you to investigate homicides, did they, Danny?
No, they'd come out and get enough information to write their murder memo, and they'd go talk to the press if the press showed up, and kind of stay out of our way. But yeah, it's different. There's different agencies all over the country though, where the lieutenants are out there investigating cases, and our department was just very different. We didn't do that.
Well, volume allowed the building of expertise very quickly, I imagine, in our homicide bureau. Same with probably LAPD, NYPD, and some of the bigger jurisdictions. I guess small agencies, sometimes you got a good investigator and he's going through the ranks, you use the talent you have, right?
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we're at the end of our show here. I know we're winding down on the scene. I want to thank you for coming on, and I'll look for another older noir movie with snippy dialogue to bring you guys on for. and I'm actually inspired, Danny. I do want to once a month try and do a book review, so I'm gonna have to read a couple of your books and bring you back and see if the snippy dialogue matches up on my other show, Briefing with the Chief. So
That'd
hey,
be awesome.
folks,
I appreciate it.
And Dan, John, thank you for coming on yet again. He's the show's movie historian, trivia guy. So I know that if I'm going to do play a game with movie trivia, I want John on my team.
He's a heavyweight.
As long as he can remember it, right? The older he gets, and can hear the question, that one too. But thank you for coming on.
Next week.
Who is? You are? Well,
yeah,
I got mine.
Signed off, and then Costco with AI in them. So
there's my hearing aids right there. I take them out for the shows. My last real day at work was a car accident that destroyed the vestibular nerve in my left ear. I can't hear a damn thing in my left ear, and there's all this crazy ringing. So I got the hearing aid. Ringing's one way.
Oh, you got tinnitus?
Oh, I had really bad. It was like I had a truck in my left ear until I started
using it. I never had that. Mine's just from all the sirens and shooting my left ear.
What they told me, and I'll trivia, and then we'll finish up the show, is when you get hard of hearing, your brain will it is making that noise. That tinnitus is just your brain. It's kind of like the sonar. It's check what's going on there, and it's making noise. And when you amplify the sound and it's going into the bad ear, then your brain is not doing that anymore, so it goes away. And so I have very few episodes of it now, every now and then, because I take them out at night. I'll have it in the morning, but yeah, it was pretty bad after that accident, and that's.
I never had that. It was just from work related. So the county paid for my inner ear hearing aids, but they didn't have AI, so I could turn them up. But every time I turn them up, all the noise came up.
Yeah, that's what I'll have to.
2 years ago.
Yeah, I have the same problem. So,
I'm getting new ones that are going to be cool.
Well, thank you for joining us, guys. I think we are at the end of our show. Be sure to watch us every Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on YouTube and Rumble, Pop Culture Minefield. You can also catch my show, Briefing with the Chief, on kgradb.com. We broadcast on Rumble, and you can catch us on Spotify and iHeart and all the other broadcasting channels. That one we just focus on news, public policy, and politics, and whatever else the Chief wants to talk about. Thank you guys again. We will see you for another movie. Martine, you can take it away.